Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is intervention, international intervention by the United States and Israel. International intervention is in the DNA of the United States of America. The United States does not play the role of bystander. The U.S. is a nation that does, not a nation that stands to the side and watches others falter and fail. Not a nation that turns a blind eye. The isolationism of America is in the past. It's not a nation that lectures or offers advice from a safe distance. So too is the international intervention in the DNA of Israel. Like brother, some would say. Unlike so many other nations in the world, the United States and Israel know that injustice is wrong. They know that deaths of innocents should not happen. They know that they have the capability to stop oppression. More importantly, they have the moral courage to intervene when the world is silent. As with the recent bombings of the Iranian nuclear sites, sometimes their intervention takes the form of military force. When talking and negotiating and applying sanctions so visible failed, when only military force could stop Iran from procuring nuclear weapons capabilities, the United States and Israel did what needed to be done. One day, perhaps, the world will say thank you. As of now, they have not. It's not always military intervention that is employed, though. Sometimes, as with Russia and China, the intervention involves economic incentives and disincentives. The one given, the one requirement in all forms of international intervention is diplomacy. Whether it is a threat of force or actual force, applied sanctions or peaceful intervention, all successful intervention requires diplomacy of sorts. Even the use of unspoken, indirect diplomacy, diplomacy which utilizes the international media or utilizes third parties, is a form of diplomacy. To think, as many do, that it is sheer arrogance of the United States to stick their proverbial nose into areas far from their borders is an example of sheer ignorance. The most glaring current example is the rampant international grumbling and complaints following the actions taken against Iran. And all those defending Iran say that the United States has no right to determine whether Iran gets or develops their own nuclear infrastructure, or even whether they secure nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. They argue that the United Nations has agencies and authority to deal with this issue. Not the arrogant United States, and certainly not the reviled small country named Israel. To the contrary, it is anything but arrogance. The US and Israel have the power to save lives, and they have firmly believed and act on that power, that saving lives is their moral imperative. They stepped up and, risking the lives of their soldiers and their military, got involved to save the lives of others without that capability or authority, and to maintain stability in a very volatile region. To say that those who argue it is the job of the United Nations to keep world order are simply deluded. That would be kind. These people hide behind the ineptitude of the UN. They know that the UN does not have the power to control, stop, or even properly monitor the nuclear situation in Iran or anywhere. They know that countries like Iran can and do intimidate, fool, and trick the United Nations. For them, it's a game. Not that the United Nations is totally ineffective. The UN has programs, and certainly effective programs. They play a large role in keeping struggling countries afloat. They can lay claim to many positive achievements through their programs, mostly regarding and related to food, agriculture, education, medicine in these developing parts of the world, where the United Nations in these countries would face much more desolation and poverty and famine if it were not for those UN programs. When it comes to stopping conflict and monitoring conflict, however, the UN is and has been, we'll say, powerless. And the UN observes and reports. That's their mandate. That's why the UN forces and their people are actually called international observers. The UN does not intervene. And by their very nature, they cannot bring the bullies to toe the line of international norms and follow the laws. It's only the threat of a power like the United States that can force the hands of dictators and religious zealots. Israel and the Jewish state assumes the same role, as with stronger ethical justification. Unlike the United States, Israel keeps to its neighborhood. Certainly, Israel sends medical rescue teams wherever they needed around the world, but military intervention is by and large limited to the region around Israel. Israel's motivation is to safeguard its citizens. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, said recently during a meeting with officials in the Syrian city of Idlib, that's in the north, that, quote, Israel is interfering in Asweda, the Druze stronghold, the area, to weaken Syria and to find an excuse to intervene in policies in the south of this country. According to Ashara, we are dealing with this and trying to do so with minimal losses, as we are accustomed to handling our problems in ways that are outside the box, not as people expect. He also claimed that elements in his country are seeking support from Israel. It is difficult for them to obtain it, and the unity struggle should not be conducted through fighting. Interventional actions assumed by the United States and Israel are motivated by altruism. Not merely by altruism, though. They gain security by intervening, and in doing so, they provide security and safety to the world as well as their nations. That's important to note. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column by Mark A. Thiessen. It was published on August 7, 2025 in the Washington Post. It's entitled, Hunger in Gaza has many authors, but Israel isn't one of them. Subtitled, Israel is doing something no nation has ever done, feeding the population of the force that attacked it. This is a very important column, and it is important that it was in the Washington Post. The column explains that there is no famine in Gaza, that it is a hoax, and this is how Thiessen begins. On Tuesday, Israel delivered 1,829,520 meals to suffering Gazans through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a non-governmental organization created this year with support of the U.S. to replace UNRWA, the corrupt Hamas-infiltrated United Nations Relief Agency. This is enough food for nearly to feed the entire Gazan population. Indeed, since May 26, the foundation reports that it has distributed at least 108 million meals in Gaza, according to the Israel Defense Forces coordinator of government activities in the territories. Israel has facilitated the delivery of 1.9 million tons of international humanitarian aid to Gaza since the start of the war by land, sea, and air, including food, water, flour, baby formula, cooking gas, shelter, and medical supplies. Here's the crux of Thiessen's thesis, that Israel is actually feeding its enemy during a war. Far from deliberate starvation in Gaza, Israel is doing something no nation has ever done or even been expected to do. Feed the population of the aggressor force that attacked it while the war is still going on. There is no historical precedent for a military providing the level of direct aid to an enemy population that Israel has provided to Gaza. John Spencer, chair of urban warfare studies at West Point's Modern War Institute, recently pointed out. The United States did not feed Germany and Japan while the war was going on. We forced their armies to surrender and then fed the populations. But the international media has swallowed Hamas's propaganda hook, line, and sinker. They're lies. These lies have been very destructive. This is how he writes it. Unfortunately, the strategy is working. We see its success in the coverage by Western media outlets, such as the New York Times, which recently published a front page photo of a Gazan mother holding her emaciated child to illustrate the suffering Israel was supposedly inflicting. It turned out the boy was suffering from pre-existing health problems, affecting his brain muscle development. The Times later acknowledged in the editor's note that it continued to report his sufferings from severe malnutrition. Of course, they failed to show his healthy, well-fed brother, perhaps because his inclusion would have undermined that assertion. We see the success of Hamas's strategy in the response of governments like France and Canada, Britain, Ireland, Spain, and Norway, which have declared, in response to the international outcry Hamas has generated, that they will recognize a state of Palestine, thus rewarding Hamas for the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack and its refusal to release Israeli hostages. Hamas does not just steal almost all the supplies that have come in. They resell them to the tune of $500 million. Thiessen continues, this success is why Hamas is determined to stop Israel and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation from delivering aid by systematically stealing it. The United Nations reports that from May 19th to August 4th, a total of 2,545 trucks carrying aid entered Gaza. Of those, 2,310, about 90%, were intercepted either by hungry people or armed actors. 31,113 tons of aid was taken. As Senator Tom Cotton explained on the Senate floor, Hamas resells looted supplies on the black market, allowing it to rake in more than $500 million in profit. Profits that fund Hamas's campaign of terror against Israel and its own people. This is so important. And meanwhile, hundreds of trucks have sat inside Gaza filled with undelivered aid because the UN wouldn't deliver it and refused to let the Gaza Humanitarian Fund distribute it. Whose fault is that? Thiessen explains that there is a policy of starvation, but not by Israel, but by Hamas. He writes, of course there's a policy of deliberate starvation in Gaza. It is being carried out by Hamas, which last week released photos of two emaciated Israeli hostages. The brother of one of the hostages told the UN Security Council this week, as my younger brother, a living skeleton, was forced to speak and dig his grave, the chubby, well-fed hand of a Hamas terrorist entered the frame. Suddenly, Hamas confirmed what we have known for months. The terrorists have plenty of food. The only ones starving in the Hamas tunnels are hostages. Thiessen concludes that it is moral blindness to blame Israel for this crisis. He writes, to lay blame for this situation at Israel's feet rather than on Hamas requires a stunning level of moral blindness, which apparently is plentiful when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. Next up is a column from Ynet. It's entitled, Israel Must Not Treat Africa as a Peripheral Market, but as a Strategic Asset. Subtitled, Analysis, countries including Rwanda, Ethiopia, Morocco, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, deepen cooperation with Israel in agriculture, technology, security, and diplomacy, positioning Africa as a key partner in an increasingly contested global arena. It was published on August 14th and authored by Ronit Hershkowitz. This is an essential idea. There are many important markets for Israel to develop. This is especially true given that certain markets are closing because of Jew hatred and the hatred of Israel. This is how Ronit Hershkowitz begins. Over the past year, Israel's ties with Africa have undergone a significant structured and multidimensional strengthening, spanning political, economic, security, and public diplomacy spheres. At a time of global upheaval, rising anti-Semitism in Europe, and distancing from some traditional allies, many African nations have become consistent, warm, and welcoming strategic partners. Countries such as Rwanda, Ethiopia, Morocco, Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia have not only maintained relations with Israel, but deepened them in core areas including agriculture, technology, water security, infrastructure, and public awareness. Ronit Hershkowitz now explains that Africa is a serious player in the world of economics, and Israel should take advantage of that. She writes, Africa is no longer a developing market. With a population exceeding 1.4 billion, critical natural resources, and strategic positions along energy, trade, and manufacturing routes, the continent is central to the rivalry among world powers, such as China, Russia, and the United States, and the European Union. China invests billions in infrastructure in exchange for minerals. Russia expands its security presence, and the United States counters with diplomacy and civilian technology initiatives. The continent is also poised to be the world's breadbasket in the coming decades, with vast untapped agricultural potential. At the same time, countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, and Niger supply essential strategic minerals, cobalt, lithium, neodymium, needed for semiconductors, batteries, and communications and security technologies. Africa has effectively become an alternative source of resources at the heart of the global tensions in Taiwan, Ukraine, and China. Hershkowitz explains just how critical it is that Israel expand into these markets and that the partnerships will result in very positive results both for Africa and Israel. She continues, Israel's role in this arena is not that of a colonial power, but an equal partner offering expertise, innovation, and experience in facing shared challenges from water scarcity to conflict management. Reciprocal visits, the opening of embassies such as in Zambia, and exchanges of Rwandan and Israeli delegations reflect this growing bond. For security and diplomacy, Hershkowitz explains that it's a win-win situation for everyone involved. There's so much to gain and so much to invest in Africa. She writes, on the diplomatic and strategic fronts, the past year has been seen tangible upgrades. Many African nations have opted to abstain or stay away from anti-Israel votes at the United Nations, sometimes adopting explicitly supportive positions within the framework of Israel's Allies Caucus. 6 African parliaments joined the pro-Israel coalition in the past year, quietly bolstering Israel's political foothold on the continent. Security cooperation has also accelerated. Morocco leads a growing list of African partners engaging with Israel's defense industry, culminating in a joint manufacturing facility combining advanced technology, strategic trust, and regional influence. Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal are exploring projects in intelligence, surveillance, border security, and civilian defense consulting, moving beyond weapons exports towards embedded Israeli doctrines of operational practices. In conclusion, Hershkowitz just explains the global power is shifting away from Europe and Africa is set to be a serious partner. She writes, Africa is not just Israel's future, it is part of its present. It is not a peripheral market, but a strategic asset, offering an independent arena where Israel can reinforce diplomatic, economic, and security ties, even as global power centers shift. As competition among the powers intensifies, Israel's deep, respectful, and purposeful partnerships on the continent will only grow in importance. Thank you, Ronit Hershkowitz, for an excellent column. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 7 cartoons. This first cartoon is in 3 panels. The sun appears to be coming up, rising, and Bibi is watching it rise, but it's a peace sign instead of a sun. And he responds by saying, no, 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 no. It stuns me that Bibi is still to blame time after Hamas is the one that constantly rejects the peace deals. The next cartoon up is a dove in a rocket, and the rocket is called War in Gaza. With a bomb inside the rocket, the dove of peace is asking which color wire should he cut to deactivate the bomb. This next cartoon is a fish stripped to the bones, and it's in the shape of Gaza on the map of the Mediterranean, right on the coast. Next up is a cartoon entitled Splendid Isolation. Bibi is a shepherd on an isolated mountaintop, proud, but all alone with his sheep and staff and Israeli flag. Next up is a cartoon of Gaza, and Israel is a shark and attacking a Gazan. It's a very dark cartoon. It's entitled Genocide Live. This next cartoon actually is Bibi dispensing aid like Pez to Gaza, and fighter jets are bombing it. It's called Gaza Aid Dispenser, Netanyahu, Israel Starvation, UN. And finally, this cartoon shows Israel and their tanks falling into Gazan graves. The cartoon is entitled Occupy Gaza, IDF Israel War Genocide coffins. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Yemen reported that the source of the explosions heard in Sana'a, the capital, was actually Israeli airstrikes in the area of Haziz power station in the southern part of the city. According to one report, the CEO of the Sana'a Electricity Corporation said that power stations were subjected to an attack which caused temporary power outages in Sana'a. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office addressed the possibility of a hostage deal, stating, "We will agree to a deal on the condition that all the hostages are released in a single phase and in accordance with the conditions of ending the war, which include dismantling Hamas of its weapons, demilitarizing Gaza, Israel maintaining security control over Gaza, and bringing in a governing body that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority, that will live in peace with Israel." IDF is launching a one-time operation of 14,600 deserters in Israel. Many of them are ultra-Orthodox, to allow them to enlist and serve without punishment despite their desertion. Operation Starting Anew begins soon with an IDF call for these deserters and draft evaders to register at the IDF Enlistment Bureau by phone or through a link to Meitab, which is the recruitment-based website. Commit to reporting for military service and arrive for enlistment on the date the deserter will be summoned in the coming weeks. If the deserter registers for the operation during the next 5 days, until the 21st of the month, it appears on the date set for them and is sent to basic training on those dates. The punishment imposed on them following their reporting to serve will be suspended. The IDF, through the coordinator of government activities in the territories, continues a series of actions to improve the humanitarian response in Gaza in accordance with political echelons directive and within the framework of the cooperation between Israel and Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, Germany, Belgium, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Indonesia. This was reported by the IDF spokesperson, who added that the recent hours, 161 aid packages containing food for Gaza residents were airdropped by 9 different countries, including Denmark and Indonesia, which joined the airdrop operations for the first time. Families of hostages spoke at a national emergency gathering of physical and mental health teams in Israel for the return of the hostages, held at Asaf HaRofeh Hospital in Be'er Yaakov. Yael Adar, mother of hostage Tamir Adar, said that as time passes, it becomes more and more difficult. "I'm experiencing sadness and depression, lack of sleep, poor nutrition, exhaustion." She also revealed that after everything we've said, the Interior Ministry issued us a certificate informing us that his burial place was unknown. Israeli actress Gal Gadot arrived to support the families of the hostages during a day of pause at the hostage square in Tel Aviv. Upon entering the room where some of the families were staying, Gadot met Lishti Lavi Miran, the wife of hostage Omri Miran. The two talked and hugged. She also met with the mother of hostage Matan Tunakauer, Einav Tunakauer, and they embraced. Former President Ruvi Rivlin also arrived at the site and the tent for the hostages for families in Jerusalem. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. I want to show you 3 short videos today. They're short. They are from World Israel News. They are videos from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They're videos. The first 2 show them stealing convoys of food, one at night and one during the day. The last video we should watch twice. It's short. It's terrorists making an anti-tank bomb from the remains of Israeli tank shell. In the end of the video, a bomb explodes in the distance. These videos are just another example of the lies and clearly show Hamas stealing the food.
عليهم فهو المقطورة مسروقة.
Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.